they have shared some information. Sorry, thanks for recording. They're going to share some information with us. I'll ask some questions and you can ask questions. We'll really be able to dig in and see what's there. And if you have standards, I encourage you to bring those on Wednesday so that we can you can share your standards, ask us questions, and see how we can help you in either refining, adding, deleting, editing, or just talking through. I think what's really important is just talking through the rationale for why we have these standards and why so many of these things exist and why you would want to have standards in place to safeguard our own organizations. And then the third session is really going to be about implementing standards. How do we go about implementing these frameworks as a safeguard for the organizations? But also to support and enhance the work that our schools are doing and that our educators are doing out in the field, and making them feel comfortable that what they're doing is actually aligned with their accrediting organization, that they're not going to have any gotchas when they come up for review, and that the organization is considered, as keeping up with what the schools and organization need. So we've got twofold purpose here, is really looking at how does NCPSA support you as the organizations in delivering quality information and resources to you so that you in turn can support and keep up with the needs of the school. So we're living in great times. These are dynamic changes that are happening, and even more so, exacerbated by the global pandemic. We know that nothing's ever going to be the same again. And really, we don't need it to be. We've now discovered teachers are highly competent. They've done a great job implementing variations of online learning or distance learning. And so the question is, how do we capture what's great? And how do we make sure that we can standardize some of that and create protocols for people who are not so excited about trying new things, and make sure that all of those fall into place. So any questions at all on that? We all good? Okay, so then if I go into this one, this is the meat and potatoes of today's, this one slide. We could talk about this for the next 5 weeks if we met every single day and debate and argue some of these. So on these resources, what I want to do is really begin to look at some of the resources that have been provided. I'm going to move this screen around. Hold on one second. Let me stop sharing this. Move that over to here. And I can start. Okay, so if I do this, I'll share this website with you, which is where you'll find most of these. And then I'll print these out and have PDFs and stuff available. But if we go to the first of the websites, so it's simply nsqol.org. And on this we have actually what's now the National Standards for Quality Online Teaching, Quality Online Programs, and Quality Online Courses. And these 3 documents are kind of, I wouldn't say the Bible or the core elements for anyone who's in the world of online learning. And, jump in, ask me questions at any point in time. But some of the rationale for this, Dave Reed and I had a really good, David, are you on? Is David on with us today?
Yes, I'm on.
Oh, great. Yeah, feel free to hop in and, have some opinions and stuff here, because I know you were also instrumental in some of the design work on this, not only with the Quality Matters, but also in with INACOL in the early days. So the reason for this, for actually really looking at these standards and really being involved in understanding the standards, even if you choose as organizations not to have, 500 standards for yourselves under different categories, it's really important that we protect the diplomas the kids are getting, and that we protect the quality of the programs they're in. And so I'll just share, before we dig into these, I can share some kind of nightmare stories that I think of. And David and I had a quick conversation about some of this. So David, jump in. So we have internationally schools that are associated with most of our organizations. And the reason I say that is, even if you have a school that is an American US based school, many of us now have our American schools who are selling online courses that anybody internationally can hop into. If you don't have standards in place for that or protocols in place for that, the biggest question that comes up is twofold. So you have, is this an American high school diploma that these kids are getting in China, Ghana, anywhere else in the world? Many of our schools are selling the American high school diploma dream to these schools. And so it behooves us to say, wait a minute, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm asking these questions. Is that a program of my school? And so does the organization need to have this accredited? Or is it just a program? And the second piece is, if it's not a program that we recognize, is it a separate school? And do we need to have something in place that says, if you're doing an online version of your school, and it's 100% online, then actually that's an online school. And so that's not part of your existing brick and mortar. The kids aren't coming in. You need to have new attendance protocols. You need to have new engagement protocols. So do I need to actually have them go through a full accrediting process for being an online school? And is that different, or is that meeting the exact same standards for what I want them to do in brick and mortar? Because it might surprise you, and that is pivotal. That is a key point for you as you have your discussions and as you begin to embark upon, where do we stand with these standards? 2 years ago, you could have had 5 or 6 standards that simply said, we will have standards for online programs, we will have standards for online content, we will have standards for online teaching, and so on. But post-COVID, most of our, well, I shouldn't say most, I haven't done an actual survey of all of your individual organization schools, but many schools globally now have online programs. They did it because they were able to increase revenues. They're able to grab kids who ordinarily could not come geographically. They can't make it to their schools, or they are outside of the US. And many of them even have websites that are blind to the US viewer, so you can't even see them. They put up the barriers so that you can only hit those websites from being international. So I'll pause there for a second before I dive into the standards. And maybe David, you have some thoughts.
Well, as we talked about when we first met last week, there are other implications going on. For instance, here in Arizona, they just passed legislation where a school, an alternative school, can generate 40% of their ADM, their funding, through online now. So you're getting to the point where it's not either or. You've got a hybrid school going on now where those students are being served partially, 60% in the classroom or in a building, and the other 40% virtual, and they're being fully funded for that. And so you're not getting the same accountability under those programs that you would if you were, say, a fully operational virtual school program here in Arizona, which is a totally different animal for somebody to go through the approval process to be. I also agree with your point that I've seen many instances where schools with brick and mortar operations that are accredited will just miraculously permeate that accreditation over to an online program or an online school. And the next thing you know, that you're making the assumption that that virtual program they're offering is accredited, when technically, like Trina's saying, they really didn't go through an accreditation process for that paradigm. And that's what I've seen.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of that. So some examples, as most of you know, I spent the last 10 years in international online education, and a very, very rapidly growing market, and I have to call it the market or the business of school. A very big growing group is schools in international countries taking classes that are supposedly from, American schools, or it happens in the UK as well, British schools, and getting a diploma by completing, 25% of the coursework that they're doing as like dual credit coursework. So So let me do this first of all. I'll stop sharing this screen just so that I can see all of you. And let's do just a show of hands or a raise. First of all, is everybody aware of these dual diploma programs that are going on in everybody's organization? That there's everybody knows, everybody's got them and everybody's aware of them. Okay, that's good. So the first question is, how many of them do you have? Make sure that you're gathering this information. So how many of these schools, how many of your regular schools are doing it? How many students are they capturing? And in that, what is the oversight protocol? So immediately we must have an oversight protocol in order to say they are meeting the standards of the school to get that, to get that diploma. If you want them to be able to do that, if it's a school with oversight. And the second piece is, is always to be asking, is this a separate online school? Should my school be applying for a second school, or are they allowed to just run these online programs, these fully virtual programs in international countries as online programs? So that is step one that's really, really important. And I'll give you an example. I have one school, I've met in I worked for a corporate school organization with multiple online schools. And as a corporation, we sold classes through these fully virtual schools internationally, just like K-12s and all of these other companies did. And it can be a very profitable business. But in that business, it's designed specifically for that. And so it's designed with online content specifically for online courses. They are designed for having oversight. There are scheduled visits to the physical campus. There are annual reviews, and they're using American teachers. What I encountered, and I'm no longer with that organization, but after 10 years, I've seen a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so on what I encountered though was many times American schools having 300 to 1,000 students. One of you is the accreditor of the school I'm thinking of right now. Anybody wants to know, you can ask me independently. But they have 300 to 1,000 students in a school in Beijing. And those kids are taking this American high school diploma, earning the American high school diploma. They're taking 25% of the required 28 credits to graduate online, sitting in China. The kids are not engaging with an American teacher. The Chinese teacher is using the American online curriculum, supposedly under the oversight of the American school. That American school may or may not have sent the principal to do a PR visit, to visit and say, yes, we're the partners. And they put up a big banner saying we're a partner with XYZ school. But the schools are then issuing a diploma. And so that raises a lot of questions that you have to be very aware of. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in the newspaper, I think, for a diploma mill. So these are the questions that come to mind. And please, ask me questions. So number one, do we have standards in our organizations that authorize or do not authorize the existence of schools that spring up as virtual schools out of our brick and mortar? That's question one. Question two, do we have protocols in place? What are we expecting our schools to do when they do have these schools? Are they supervising, onboarding? Are they using our teachers? Do we have protocols in place for the teachers, and so on? The second piece of it is, if we say yes, then we're on a path. We know that we're going to do a separate, we know we're going to allow that to happen. And so we set the protocols in place as if it's a hybrid model. Are you going to require the students to do a semester on campus at the parent school to validate who they are? How are you validating who they are? And so on. Very, very big business, and needs to have some protocols around it. Why? Because the universities are accepting those diplomas as if they are a diploma from Joe Bloggs High School in the US that is done online. And they're giving them the equivalency of it. And what happens when that Chinese or that other student from another country arrives in and actually has extremely limited English, and we know would not have actually gone into, would not have made all of that content. They couldn't have gone through all that content because the teacher is allowing a watered down version of it or is doing it in a bilingual model. So all kinds of issues that come up around this. So let's say we agree now that we're going to have, we are going to say, okay, this is a separate school. We're having a program in place. So now what we need to do is establish what are the standards. Are we actually going to have a whole, have the school apply to open a second school, to open a virtual school? And if you are, then you need to make the decision. Are we using the same standards for the brick and mortar school, for the new online school? And if you are, great, but now you need to increase the technology usage standards and the training of the teacher standards. So what standards are we using if we're now allowing a school to apply for a second school, which is a virtual version of itself? And what are the things that we're going to ask the school to do? The third, then, I keep saying first and second, and there's so many points around there. So then the next piece of that is looking at hybrid programs. So are hybrid programs simply programs of the existing school, or are those hybrid programs, do they need something else? And those are the questions that we have to have, because in a hybrid program, the number one problem that pops up in the hybrid versions is, okay, but Florida is pretty much like Arizona as well. And whether you're in public or private schools, they still have, legislation out there that says there are standards in order to issue a diploma and so on, because the private school legislation says you just, you upload, but you follow whatever the graduation requirements are and so on as minimums. So when you have a hybrid program, the question becomes the curriculum. I think is one of the key things. Is your hybrid program where you're allowing, say, 40% of the time the student is taking online classes, is that curriculum the same curriculum you're using in the classroom? Or is it coming from an outside resource or another source? Because then you're getting into things like choosing the quality of online courses, and how do you validate that online service provider is providing the same quality of work? In other words, what is your platform? What is your set of standards for identifying what you're doing in those online classes? So the simplest is, these classes are online because my own teachers are teaching these classes live or asynchronously, and they have all the material uploaded, and it's the same stuff we're doing in class. Okay, that's one level. What most people are doing is partnering with a curriculum content provider. And those providers are people like K12, Edgenuity, Edmentum, all of these people that have content, and these content providers have now, because the market has grown so much, they've added a layer of teaching services, as they call it, over it. So, what's the quality of the teaching services? Are these teachers certified in my state to meet state requirements or to meet my own requirements? Have I taken these teachers from the other company through all the same safeguards and protocols that I would expect my own teachers to take, and so on? So it begins to spider web out and to really mushroom when you start using third-party providers, and most of us are using third-party providers. I have been in the world of being a third-party provider, and so I know that many in the private school organizations are using third-party providers, and it opens up a whole load of questions. So I don't know if David or Larry or anybody else has questions.
Well,
and then we'll do.
Well, Edmentum and Edgenuity both also have their own private schools. They also have schools, so they can literally enroll a student and graduate them. Because the academy that Edmentum I helped start that in 2007.
I get it. I absolutely. So for me, that's a big flag, David.
Yeah.
That becomes, we're introducing a competitor in. You're absolutely right. What happened was a lot of these online people were just content in the days when 2006, 2008, and so on. We just needed online content. It was a digitization of a textbook for people that wanted online courses, predominantly in, alternative markets, in the alternative schools or credit recovery and so on. The market started to change, apologies. The market changed, and then we said, okay, there's actually a place for teaching services. People want us to teach a one-off. They want that piece. And now with this new, especially with COVID, they've all become accredited online schools.
Well, also Edgenuity, which I've used Edgenuity now almost 12 years. I've been using that platform in different capacities. Another thing they offer that we didn't have in my programs was they're also NCAA approved, which is a huge market, because if I've got a kid that's potential scholarship kid, Division I kid, I can't serve them. I cannot serve that kid with my content or my program because it won't clear the clearinghouse. It will not. So if that kid needs courses that are approved, I've got to send them directly to an Edgenuity to take those courses so that they will clear the clearinghouse.
Okay, so Paul, I see you sighing, and it is, where are your thoughts going? Why don't we just kind of go around and everybody have some thoughts because once I start digging into these standards, then it's a roll in those standards.
I think especially for my schools, how we handle third-party providers is going to be the biggest issue, because we have quite a few people now providing third-party providers. And how does that third-party provider pursue accreditation if they want to play in the marketplace? So that's the big questions I have.
I'll say this too, that I think the amount of oversight from I've seen, because most of these programs we're speaking about are going to be private. They're going to be private because I can't serve a student in a state-funded virtual school unless they're a resident. Okay, so I have to be a resident. And so they're probably going to be private. And what I have found is everybody's in different states. The oversight of private schools varies greatly by state. Extreme. For instance, here, none. None. There is virtually no oversight in the state of Arizona over private schools. So your only real oversight accountability is accreditation. It really is. I mean, that's basically it, because the state really doesn't mandate standards or requirements or anything to a private school. And then here anyway.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, to your point, to both of you, the question of oversight of third-party providers, or how do we evaluate or assess, or how do we determine what works? I've used Edgenuity, I've used Edmentum, I've used quite a number of them, and I would seriously recommend that we look at a couple of things, that you look at a couple of things with your principals. And again, I'm happy to workshop this, and I'm sure David and some of you who are in this would also look into this with us. But the content in many of these online programs is designed for use in our public school system and for checking the boxes for what meets requirements in public school. And so that may conflict with where some of you are standing right now with some of the materials and so on. The fact that they've also opened up their own online private schools, or their own schools, means that they are direct competitors with your schools and programs. They will draw your students out if someone realizes how much they enjoy being online, and that's a growing homeschool market that is growing exponentially. People realize that they only go to school for the social because they can get everything else outside. Then we've seen through COVID private. So let me backtrack. We've seen private school numbers increase through COVID. Why? Not because we were drawing and attracting them because we're so brilliant, but because of being repelled out of the public school systems that were shutting down and weren't able to meet their needs and weren't able to service them. In the next year or so, you will see that begin to balance again, and people will start to look at, what am I really getting value for the dollar? What am I really getting? Because people make decisions for all kinds of reasons. And so many people will realize that I can actually get quality of life by having online courses and online programs, and then use those other financial resources or use that time with my family to take on activities and travel and lots of other things that I want to do as a value for my own family. And so where the sneaky play is I've been an online provider. And been a corporate private provider, you know. So the sneaky play is, what the hope is that we've hooked these kids in this online world. We've got them where they enjoy the classes. It's meeting all the check boxes. And actually, as David says, sometimes they're meeting check boxes that our private school doesn't check, such as if I'm a student athlete and I'm doing club ball and so on, and I want to check off that NCAA, but there are other check boxes. And so when we put that together and you look at things like that, we're actually inviting into our schools, just to save money or just to save time, we're inviting in our own competition. And, you know, it really is, worth looking at. Larry?
Just a couple of points. Many of our associations are faith-based associations. And when you go out and purchase secular curriculum, you have to be really careful that you're still meeting the mission of the organization, and not co-opting the mission of the organization because of price or because of ease of use. And I have many schools that shopped around and bought curriculum based on price, not based on quality standards, not based on anything other than that's the cheapest they could find in order to check all the boxes they had, and they didn't worry about mission. The other thing I'd say is that early on in your conversation, Trini, you talked about, you know, these online schools. You should have a substantial change in program protocol set up in your organization, and you should have schools that go through a substantial change program in order to offer online courses. They shouldn't just automatically be allowed to morph into an online program. They should go through a substantial change in program process in order to do that.
Great.
I think Trina is locked up.
Can you hear me, Larry?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the internet has gone out 2 or 3 times. Xfinity apparently is having an issue in the area. So Larry, maybe.
All right. So, you know, I think that we need to make sure that that we always have, I think that's the whole purpose of this session, is that we build standards that we hold our schools accountable to in the online market, in the online arena. So without that, we just let them do whatever they want to do and choose whatever they want to choose for curriculum, and we end up in places we don't want to be. Are you back, Trina?
I can. Not responding. Can you hear me?
You're in and out.
Let me see if I can come in using my phone.
Okay.
And that way then I have sound. Apologies, I'm so sorry. It's always the way of it, isn't it? As soon as you want to do it, you end up with I mean,
this is a really good example of what happens in online education, in which, you know, all of a sudden the teacher, they're teaching a live course and their internet goes down in their area. You have to have protocols in place in order to get that content across to students. You can't just say, well, I'm sorry, my internet's down today. See you tomorrow. So I think this is a good example of some of the issues you have to address with standards of how you're going to deal with these kinds of situations. All right, we're going to, I think Trina will come back in again with.
I think Wanda had a question, Larry.
All right, Wanda, go ahead.
It's kind of a nuts and bolts question, because I do have a group of people that I'm interacting with that are wanting to set up an online school. And so I have a couple of nuts and bolts questions. It's going to be established in Tennessee. So, and they will probably have some international students. When you do that, and you're issuing a diploma for the school, when you look at curriculum, you know, in the US, it's going to be a US diploma. So in the US, you have a requirement that they take a class in American history. Do you still require that for an international student, or could you make an option for them to study, you know, the history of their country? You know, this is new to me, so this is why I'm asking these questions.
If it was an American diploma, the school we had did work with international. It is accredited by Accreditation International Middle States as well. But we required them as part of the graduation requirements to take the regular US history, government, social studies that the regular student would take here if they were taking the same program. And in fact, if their history was transferred in, so we get obviously here we get a lot of students come up from Mexico, obviously, so we get a lot of Mexican transcripts, and so their history would be transferred, or government would be transferred as elective.
As an elective.
As an elective,
Yeah.
yes. And the same thing if they're taking English, they're technically taking English like I would be taking Spanish. So it's a second language. So it actually does not count as core English courses. It would count as an elective. That's just giving you kind of the path that we went through with our private school that served international students.
Yeah, David, those are great examples. Wanda, you know, some of the things that I've experienced, first of all, you set the standards. So, you know, those are decisions that you have to make on what is a graduation requirement for those international schools, because most of those schools will already have more math even than our kids will have, or they'll have, you know, 5-6 years of, they'll have a lot of math and science. And so generally they meet the same graduation requirements, but to the point of English, are you going to require that they do English literature? Are you going to do British Lit or American Lit? Or what are the pieces that are going to be requirements? Is it US history? Is it American government? You know, are you going to also include economics, or will you allow one of the math classes to substitute for economics? So it's very important that those standards, that those items are identified up front.
And I will also say that if it's Carp Lake Christian School and they're giving a diploma to a local student, and they're giving a diploma to a student in Mexico, you better be sure that they're getting the same content. And usually what we do is we try to make sure that the Mexican student passes the same semester exams and final exams as the student in Arizona has to take, so that you know that the quality of education is the same and not a watered down curriculum or in the international school. So it's important that you hold standards for curriculum and for learning, as well as for everything else in the program.
What we found out too is when we started working with international, it spawned a few other issues, because they tend to want things like honors and AP courses. And so we had to totally shift our entire plan because our program was founded on dropout recovery. so,
Yeah.
so when we begin to develop new programs, including the private school, then we had to retool basically for much higher level market wanting those type of courses and create the AP and the honors courses that they wanted as part of their diploma track.
That's absolutely right, David. In the international space, the vast majority of kids are those that think they're going to Ivy League universities. The kids that we would have credit recovery and online and so on for in the US, they're not the ones in the international space that are coming in and looking for these online classes. So, you know, it also then begs the question of how are you evaluating those, to Larry's point, how are you evaluating those courses and so on. And that's where a lot of these resources come into play. But if you are new to this, new to thinking through this, it is overwhelming. Rome is not built in a day, as they say, and you're not going to be able to put together, which is why we're here. You're not going to be able to learn all of this in the next 3 days or 5 days. But just know that the resources are there, and people have been doing this for over a decade, maybe 2 decades as well. Some of us have been around that long in this business. So we're here to help. Don't anybody have panic attacks or worry about it right now. The resources are there. Larry, one of the other things, just before I dropped out, I heard you talk about, you know, many of us are faith-based schools, and the religion piece of it, you know, that is important. So the question is, if your rules are that you can earn a high school diploma for participating in 25% of the curriculum at the high school. So if you have, let's say you have, I'll take the 24 classes to graduate from high school. That means that 7 courses need to come from you. And the other, courses are going to come from my existing school. So if that's the case, or 6 courses, sorry, that's 6. So if the 6 courses are coming from the online program and the other 18 classes are coming from my school in China or Africa or wherever it is, then the question is, out of those 6 classes, do I still require the 4 courses, actually it's 8 semester courses, the 4 years of religion, for example, in the Catholic schools, the formal instruction, because you just can't fit them in. And yet your protocol is 25% of the coursework must be. So what are your absolute requirements? And then what are your others? And if you're doing, I've actually seen the faith-based schools work with schools in China, and what would the word be? Unfaith or defaith the coursework, which is actually the premise for your school. So they've taken all that component out because you can't teach with Christian principles and so on in some of these countries. So it's been very interesting growing and learning and being involved in this industry from all perspectives. Just know that it's not an easy one size fits all. So you've got the, what do I need to do? Let me circle everybody back again. What do I need to do to have my schools in the domestic market be correctly aligned with the standards that we have for accreditation? So question number 1, we'll go back again and we'll say, do I have standards in place if someone has launched an online school? Question number 2 is it the same set of standards for my brick and mortar school, or do I have a set of standards, or do I want to have a set of standards for a virtual school program? And does this require the school to have a separate application and go through a protocol for that? And if I allowed it as an emergency during COVID or during the pandemic, what's the timeline I'm going to put together to cycle them all back around again? Am I going to now impose a timeline? Is it within the next, 24 months, or the next time you come up for a review? Or what is my timeline and my process going to be to go back to managing that application process for my schools? Or am I disbanding all of this altogether and saying, now, if you want to launch an online school, you got to start from scratch, and we're going to go through the system. So think through those timelines, think through those requirements for your domestic market. Second series, or part B, is what if we just have hybrid programs and people have gotten used to taking classes online as part of the brick and mortar. They've gotten used to their flexible schedules. They've gotten used to really being able to blend their master schedule, have some classes on campus, some classes off. You know, what is my protocol for that? Do I have a set of standards that I'm going to use for this? And, or is that a separate application? Is a blended or hybrid version of school the same as the brick and mortar? And then that really boils down to the use of third party or non-third party, because it's simple if I'm doing it myself with my own teachers. That's kind of an extension of my school. But once I get into the world of third party providers, now I'm opening a can of worms, because now that can of worms needs to be dissected. And you know, so a lot of thoughts on that. Section C is if I've got international schools. Do I have international schools that are just part of my network? Because accrediting those international schools is the same as accrediting your domestic schools if they're using online or hybrid. That's a separate, you know, that's a group. The nuance here is, are my American-based schools offering international schools not affiliated with my network online diplomas? And that's where the big issues start to come out. And I'm happy to help with that. Yes, sir. I think you've got your on mute.
My experience has been that what we absolutely need to do is to evaluate and measure the progress. We're not looking so much at the course, what the outcomes are. Some of their courses will have a different layout than ours, different requirements, certainly requirements of the students, but ultimately, I mean, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. What happens to the students? Can they take a test and come out with the same results? And does the evaluation show that they've absorbed the material? I mean, how does everybody else feel about that? I've kind of neglected what they're learning as opposed to what they've achieved in the process.
So,
any thoughts on that?
well, just throw in one thought before then we can kind of go around everybody on that. Having been in the world of online learning for almost 20 years, I'm going to absolutely agree with you that sometimes the quality of the online learning programs, so those third-party providers, is outstanding, and kids are getting into top universities with them. The question is, are you aligning those with, do you have standards in place to have some kind of oversight and not just allow the schools to pick up, you know, any random fly-by-night organization? Because many of the times, to your point, this content in many of these organizations is, what do I use? I use the word edutainment instead of educational. You know, they look good, they zip along, they're snazzy looking classes, but at the end of the day, are they learning from these? And are they learning what we need them to learn or what we want them to learn as part of the relationship with our organization? Okay, Karen?
Hi, how are you? I'm just wading in the water right now and I'm taking it all in. So I'm making all kinds of notes. So I'll probably have more questions in the next session.
Great, that's great. Jim?
Yes, I'm with the Association of Lutheran Schools Online, Amazing Grace Virtual Academy. And so we were an online service provider accredited through Middle States. We have now transitioned into a high school. And because we have some students that were looking for the 4-year diploma from us, we're based in Minnesota. So we're making sure we follow those state standards as well. We're part of WELSA with Paul Patterson. So we work with him also. So everything that has been said here, yeah, I agree with that. I have been part of, or had been part of this commission years ago, but then stepped away for a few years. So I am very familiar with everything that is done here and with the standards. So thank you for bringing in some new leadership on this.
No, and thank you for the work you've done, and also for allowing us. We'll pick your brains tomorrow then as an experienced member of the group. You know, as people get a chance to dissect what we're talking about today, or to really, really absorb it, then we'll pick it to pieces when we start looking at everything everybody has when we get together on Wednesday. So thanks, Jim. Larry, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize that the whole purpose of NCPSA is to be a resource to each one of you in your organizations. And we want to tell you that we have, with David on board now and with Dr. Grunwald and Trina, we have a lot of experience and we're willing to help you individually through this process. So we're not going to just have these seminars and then expect you to learn everything, Karen. We want to be there to help you. So let us know how we can be helpful. We have enough resources that we can help you.
Larry, let me do a follow-up question. I'm Cliff from Florida Association of Christian Colleges and Schools. Can you provide for us a couple contact pieces of information to reach out to NCPSA and to you, Larry?
Yes, I'll start writing those in the chat so that you have. I'll put Clay, myself, Trina, and David. If you put your contact information in the chat, and
Got
Dr.
it.
Grunwald, if you'd put your information in the chat.
Thank you.
Sounds good. James, I see James Lawson and Steve Lindquist, you're on deck. James, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I had to zone out for just a few minutes. I had a phone call that I had to take. It's been very informative. The FCCPSA, we've got 2 schools that are fully virtual and have been since their beginning. So their whole process was along those lines. But most of the rest of our schools are more of a traditional school. They don't, and most of them do not have a virtual program, although, you know, there was a lot of options with COVID where a lot of schools did some programs. And that's one of the things we're researching right now is the schools that, you know, started offering some classes virtually. If they've kept those programs going, we're trying to let them know that that means we've got to evaluate those programs separately as either a new component of their everyday program or if it's going to be a standalone program. But so this has been, I mean, this is right where all of us are kind of living right now because all of our schools did this over COVID, and a lot of them really haven't figured out what to do, whether to keep doing it or whether to go back to the way they always did things. So.
Thanks. I'd be interested in the data once you start to collect it. I think it'll be really helpful for all of us to see how you're gathering that and the kinds of questions you're asking. So if you don't mind, you know, keep us all in the loop and share some of that as you gather it. That would be really helpful. Steve?
So ACTS has a couple of different pathways to digital distance accreditation. We have a standalone protocol that has 11 standards that a school can walk through if they are a completely digital platform or a completely distance platform. We have digital platform and we have distance. Distance, we do have some schools that we accredit that have a dual fold process where they're still using some paper paces, but they are distance at a couple of elementary grade levels. So we throw the distance word in there for those couple of programs. Just as they're very unique, they're one-offs, but we do offer the distance conversation, but most of them are digital. But then we have a hybrid model where we have a digital addendum to a brick and mortar accreditation, where if a school says we cross over the threshold of a percentage that we've given the school that says more than 50% of a division's curriculum is given virtually, then the school must go through both the brick and mortar and this 7 standard addendum. So that gives our schools that maybe have a K-8 school, but are birthing a high school, and they have a high school that they are doing in a virtual model setting. They do those 7 addendum standards, and it brings to bear all of those best practices in virtual learning, as well as the brick and mortar. And we also use that for those schools who, like James was talking about, discovered that, you know what, in this COVID environment, they wanted to offer a completely online conversation and have this. Most of our schools that are keeping those are ones that maybe have And I use the word transient population, not in a derogatory sense, but they're military-based families. They are missionary-based families, where they want to have a connection back to the school their kids went to for a number of years. They fell in love with the school and they want their kids to graduate from that school, so they stay connected through that digital platform school. So we've developed kind of a multi-phased process to be able to credit those schools.
Steve, that's really great. If you can you be ready tomorrow to pop those up and share and walk us through those? We'll add that to the middle states and to the group from Arizona so that we can have a look at some varieties. If you're willing to do that, that would be great for everybody, I think.
Tomorrow or Wednesday?
Oh, sorry, Wednesday. Yeah. Sorry, Wednesday.
So I can send them to somebody and you can pop them up on Wednesday. I am leading an accreditation team and it's day one of a school visit. So I don't know. I may be available. I may not be. I just don't know at this point.
Send them to me. If you can send those to me,
Sure.
It's great because I'll get a chance to look at them ahead. That's wonderful. Thank you. Wesley, any thoughts or comments?
None specifically. We're just now getting our feet on the ground with our brick and mortar accreditation protocols. We do have about 5 schools in our organization who they have partnered with either 7-Star or Ignitia to offer their own separate virtual program. And some kids are a little on campus and a little virtual. So both of those programs are NCAA approved and are accredited by Cognia. So at this point, they're not seeking a separate accreditation from us on their virtual schools. The rest are just supplementing their curriculum with some of those online programs. So I just wanted to see where we need to go as an organization concerning distance ed and online programs. So
well, and so I know Star very well, and I know it's a high quality program. I knew Mark when he founded it, and I know they've gone through some leadership changes, but I know that's a quality group with a similar mission and vision as probably most of you here.
correct.
But the question is, you've still got to have a standard in place as an accrediting organization, should anything happen with that. So, we still would like to say that your organization would have standards in place that say, this is the standard if you're working with a third-party provider. Are you authorizing that 100% of the instruction is done by that third-party provider? And if so, because I know that when you, for example, when you partner with 7-Star or, a Catholic Virtual or any of these faith-based groups that are out there, and probably even the groups that some of you had virtual schools here, you may be servicing other organizations. So when you're a service provider and you're not the big corporate service provider, but you're the school-based and you were designed as a school, and so you're accredited, NCAA approval, and so on. Most of those also have teaching standards in play, and you can work with them to determine which teachers, and you have some say in that. So you just want to make sure that as you're using those, that you don't neglect to have a standard in place that says, as the accrediting organization, we authorize our schools to use providers that have met the protocols or met the standards for us. These standards include, and then you can design a set of standards or identify standards that your current providers would meet. Because otherwise, it's great today, but you will find over time, people will begin to add other providers that just don't make the grade. And so you put that standard in place that says, we authorize online providers, we authorize our schools to select, here's the protocol, or here are the examples we would like to make sure that our schools are meeting when using those providers. For example, the provider is NCAA approved. The provider has its own accreditation. The provider has reciprocity with our organization. So I would even say there's value in you, even though, for example, 7-Star has, and 7-Star would kill me for this, but, even though they've got Cognia accreditation, I would insist that they go through a reciprocity process with my accrediting organization so that they understand the value of my accreditation too. So there's things like that. And these big companies, even 7-Stars now, it's a corporation. So, these companies understand that's part of the price that they pay for being able to be in your schools. And that way you have some authority over those organizations as well. So I'm looking at that. Clay, anything else? Because I think we've been 1 hour, and I'm going to suggest that we take 5 minutes for as they call it, a bio break, have a cup of tea or coffee, and then we'll resume and we'll
Yeah.
actually begin.
I'm on a video call, but
I think a break would be good.
taken myself
Are we
off,
good?
so go
Okay.
ahead.
So let's
Take a break for 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break. And Larry, you need to mute your phone.
We're-
Mute,
we've
mute.
been on pins and needles.
I'll try to mute him right now.
Will you? Thanks. Okay. All right. And we will, we'll see everybody in 5 minutes. I'm going to grab a cup of tea.
Great.
Thanks.
So did we lose Trina?
Well, she's still on there. It's just that it's blanked out.
Yeah. All
Video's
right.
off.
Let me share a couple.
We were taking a 5-minute break, Larry. So,
All right. All right.
so we probably got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Then you can start off and
I just
about.
heard dead quiet and I.
No, it's
took a quick
okay.
Phone call. and-
It's okay. It's okay.
Hey, Clay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to share my screen so that we can, oh, it says disabled screen. Can you let me share again, Clay?
That's weird. Okay. Wonder why. Maybe because you logged on and logged out that one time. Let's see.
Not
There you
sure.
go.
Let me close out a few things here because I'm seeing internet issues again.
Well, you can thank Xfinity for us.
Let me see here. Let me go. All right, let me share this one. All right, can you all see the page I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a really great tool. This is a great source of information. You know, those of you who are veterans know this information inside out and upside down, as they say. And those of you who are new to it really should use this as a founding set of documents for anything that you're looking at. So for example, these are the quality standards for online teaching, quality standards for online programs, and quality standards for online courses. I'll leave the teaching piece out of it because for right now, we'll look at that later on. So we'll start with the online programs. And notice it's different from online courses. So this is where if you're even allowing third-party providers to come into your schools, we should be looking at some of these for standards, and we'll hit those today. But let's begin with the online programs. And in the online programs, notice there are standards A through N, how to evaluate programs. These are really, really great because these actually are good titles or good ways for you to begin to create standards yourself, such as what's the mission and vision of the online school or the online program? How is it governed? What's the leadership planning? What are the staff? What are the materials and resources? And so on. So if somebody is actually launching an online school or an online program, these are really, really good. I won't go into the whole thing. I'll look just very quickly, we'll go through. So, you know, these are the subsets of the standards. You know, is there a mission statement to give the purpose of the program? Does it indicate learning as the focus? You know, many of these organizations have hopped in, and many of our online schools have hopped in, and they're really there just to make money, to expand their reach, expand their presence. And so what it does in these standards is it goes down, gives you an explanation and an example. And the examples I find to be really, really good. You know, as you go through all of these different things, it gives you some really, really great examples. You can download it. It's a great resource to download, and I recommend that you actually do this and go back down through it. So we can go in here into the, let's see, I'll skip through all of this, but you can go through those and see yourselves. So there's an issue right now, we're all looking at questions of diversity and equity and so on. Those are issues where we may struggle in meeting some of the state requirements and so on. And so you get some really good equity and access examples for all of the different pieces here, you know. So do we have policies, appropriate policies? Is there something published? Is there a guide? You know, do we have accommodations for children with disabilities? You know, what do we offer with regard to Wi-Fi access? All of those things. So they give you some really well-written, well-researched examples in each of these areas. There's integrity and accountability. You know, this may or may not reach to our question on the international diplomas. So, where are your diplomas hitting the standards that you have for integrity? That's a question. David, any thoughts on this one on integrity or diversity? I mean, I know these are key, but this is where we can really put our meaningful things that are meaningful to us in as standards in this area.
Yes, and well, I think you're also seeing a big push now for the social emotional learning. It's a huge push right now. So a lot of this will be involved in these standards as well. Eventually, I think, as far as serving the whole student, not just academically, but socially, emotionally, that those kind of points that are going to be made as we move forward. But yes, I think this area is where you get a lot of flexibility within the program that you're creating.
Yeah, and to your point, this is where we can put really clarify in simple terms what's valuable and what's important to our individual organizations, and that'll vary from organizations, but they give you some really nice examples, and you can begin to modify. You can take this language and modify this language to meet your own needs. There's also the area of curriculum and course development. So since that became an issue, notice that this is, what do the courses have? Even if you're building them yourself, or if you are, that will really go over to the course evaluation, the separate set of standards. But in an overall, a general program, you need to make sure that even third-party providers have, what's the educational goals? What are the standards? Are we evaluating the technologies being used? Many times people, the systems are crashing, or they don't have support for your students. And, is there kids are going to do these classes at night? Your international kids are going to take them at 1 a.m. So, what are the support services in play? Are you doing that, or are you just using like online textbooks? So there's a lot of issues there. Are we meeting copyright laws, or are your teachers just throwing stuff up into an online environment, cutting and pasting, and, what are those? So there's lots of really, really great, great conversations around the values of these. Are the programs goals stated clearly? Can stakeholders easily navigate around the system, or does it take a degree in engineering to be able to just take the classes to learn how to do it? Is it simple? And they get a lot of great resources here. So this is, I don't want to sit and read everything to everybody. The bottom line is that there are standards here for the technology use. There are standards for the content. These are high level standards that every program should have, right down to asking you questions about design principles, copyrights, and so on. Then it gets into the instruction. And, this is why we're all here, right? Everything else is a tool for us on this instruction. Do children learn? And so are there clear expectations for the curriculum? Is it evidence-based, or just people have thrown a lot of stuff together as products? And this kind of goes back to, the question I asked earlier, is it edutainment or educational value? A lot of people have what appears to be great online curriculum, but back to rabbis, are they learning? Do we know what's the evidence? What are the results? Just because something has bells and whistles doesn't mean it's actually any more effective than somebody's PDFs. If the teacher does a good job using PDFs, that can even be more effective than all the bells and whistles on the technology. So, is there inclusive, is instruction inclusive for all learners? Do we have honors programs? Do we have AP programs? Do we have remedial programs? And, where's the academic integrity? So lots of really great standards here. Lots of examples for you, which is really, really good. If you don't know what they are, to really understand them, they'll give you a good example. How are you assessing your learners in the online environment? So again, they've got 4 standards here on assessment. Is there timely, effective feedback? Are the assessments actually aligned with the learning objectives? One of the, and those of you who have used online, one of the things that I always find interesting is, many of the online programs that are what I'll call the old hunt and peck click software, you can have 2 chances or 3 chances to get an ABC multiple choice correct. And so all you've got to do is write down the number you got. If you you know, if you said A and it's wrong, then you say B, it's wrong. Well, C is right, and you've got third chance. You can actually do it or increase your ability to guess. So, you know, are they asking for more? You know, is the assessment rigorous?
And that's why you really want to look for, just a side note there, you want to look for a program that has a large question bank. It just isn't just a small assessment bank of questions, so that you minimize that ability.
David, you're right. And I always like to look for, you know, programs that require extended response or projects or other assignments that are, and labs and so on. So it's not just, you know, multiple choice.
Yeah, critical
What I
thinking
found is,
skills
and
important.
I'm sorry, what I found is that's the first thing they take out when they mess with the content. The first thing they go after is the project, which is crazy, but that's what they do because it takes more time and more grading. So just, that's another warning.
No, it really is. And I saw that myself with an organization I worked with. You know, they had spent 2 years. Well, actually, I was part of it. We spent 2 years building fabulous projects. As you know, end of course exam was actually a project. And you know, and it really was like a capstone, you know, for high schools. And you know, as soon as someone else got involved with the organization, the first thing they took out was those, because it was too expensive to pay educators to grade those.
Exactly.
So it's really important that you start looking, to your point, that you really look at these. Larry, you had some thoughts?
I was just going to say the critical thinking skills is an important part of learning, and just rote knowledge is very low on Bloom's taxonomy. So we really need to make sure that we're building critical thinking skills in students online as well.
Well, you're right. And if we go back to, I know Ashley, who was a keynote speaker with us at the January event, she talked about a body of knowledge. And there are some things that just can't be watered down. And so, you know, really having to dig in and engage and interact with content is very important, whether you're online or in person. And we're also finding a lot of schools are using this online content, online programs as part of the regular school day. So the kids are not doing it from a distance, but they are engaging and interacting with online curriculum in the school in lieu of a textbook. So they've adopted this as the curriculum. A teacher is there. So it's not actually an online or virtual school. Someone can take it virtually, but this is replacing the textbook in the classroom. So again, you know, oversight on some of that is also really important. There's some great standards on faculty and staff support. So, you know, are they providing feedback? Well, how do you know? You know, is that just auto-graded scoring? Is it just an end of term grade? Are the faculty getting appropriate professional development, you know, specifically for being an online and hybrid, which is very different to a regular set of courses? And if they're using this in a brick and mortar classroom, that teacher also needs training and instruction on how to effectively support student learners who are learning online, even though they're sitting in a room. So really interesting standards here, lots of good explanations. You can see examples here, again, on the teaching and so on. They also have a nice thing here about, you know, the parents and the guardians and the support, some of the protocols that you need to have in place for really interacting and engaging with families, because what makes our schools valuable and really different from a public school very often is the, I'm gonna say the ambiance, but actually the community, you know, it's the relationships. And, you know, it's important that the online families continue to remain engaged and continue to have the online school reflect how we want to communicate in an online environment. And we lose a lot of that because not only are they not physically coming in and getting to know us, but the reverse happens. They're so used to getting instant answers and instant grades that the parent wants instant communication with the teacher and can feel like, you're not answering my emails. Well, you know, I've been teaching 3 classes. So, you know, I didn't get to your email or I didn't get to your text. So putting some some protocols around expectations for teachers communicating with families and families communicating with teachers. You know, teachers are not on demand unless you have a specific person answering those emails. You may have people getting annoyed or getting irritated because I sent an email at 8 o'clock this morning and, hey, guess what? It's 2 o'clock. You didn't answer me yet. So, you know, putting some of that around. David or Larry, any thoughts?
Well, that's, and to piggyback off of that, one of the most important things that I've found over the years, and especially coming from an administrative point of view, documentation, communication records. I mean, we recorded everything in our communication records. And that's two reasons. One, a record, obviously, but number two, as an administrator or as another teacher with that student, I'm going to look at that first. I'm going to look at that first and look at the history of that student or recent history before I even approach the student or the parent about not working or not performing or whatever the case is. And it just saves a lot of redundancy when you got the 3 teachers or 4 teachers hitting the kid with the same issue when maybe they lost their internet or their computer's down or something like that. So communication logs and documentation is just huge.
Absolutely. You know, I know, for example, you know, I can think of incidents even where, you know, those logs came into play. So are you having online parent conferences? You know, are you meeting and you need to have your records to be able to pull up. The administrator needs to also have oversight to be able to see those. So the choice of technologies and the choice of resources is really important, that you're set up in your online environment, not just the biggest mistake you can make, I think, is, well, one of them is outsourcing your kids to a third party, is just sending kids into somebody else's platform to go, because you no longer own the records. And so just saying, hey, I'm using this to take math, go here, log into that software and take your math class or take your English class. You've got to flip that so that the service provider provides into your database. And those are fairly complex relationships to negotiate.
Well, years ago, Trina, I was in a district here, a large district, when I first started my first online program, and they were outsourcing at the time, the online program. And my number one argument to create my own was I, as a district administrator and teacher, will have tenfold the care or concern for that student than an outside entity. And it's just a fact. I mean, they're going to, your special needs teachers, your services, your counselors, you as a district employee and part of the education community are going to have far more care or concern for the success of that student than an outside contractor. That's what I've seen.
No, you're 100% on it. And that's, I think, where we have to make sure we don't lose the fact that we are responsible. They signed up for us for our school. The resources are no better or no bigger than any other research, any textbook or any activity we would have set up for the students. The accountability and the responsibility for that child still resides with us as the school. And so, you know, to your point, making sure that not only our policies are in play, but also our support for that virtual student. So do we have guidance counselors? Do we have special needs teachers? Do we have protocols in place on how we're having those standards? Are we doing virtual counselor night or meet the parent night? Are we doing open houses? All of the things that we're doing, we need to establish those protocols. And again, some great resources here, but launching an online school is not easy. And so schools that are doing it with just their own existing team and outsourcing that to a third party, those are where you have possible misalignments, is all I'll say. And then the guidance services and academic advising, the kids, so when kids get into, let's say, an Edgenuity, an Edmentum, whatever the third party provider is, K-12 or anybody, you know, they have access to a full course catalog of other offerings. They're going to see that. They're going to see some of those things. You know, are you making sure that your third party provider is blind to the other students? You know, is that a single sign-on? Are we blind? Or are we making sure the kids are getting what we want? We're still in control. of that, delivering that guidance and those requirements, or are the kids getting fed some other stuff? And I think some of those things are really important questions to ask.
Let me jump in here real quick, Trina. I think another point is that we have to treat online students the same we would treat a brick and mortar student. We need to be involved in their lives. We need to be personal with each student and not just say, you know, correct, incorrect, yes, no, but we need to engage with those students because school is more than just imparting knowledge. And, you know, I'm teaching a class right now for college professors on how to teach online. And the interaction that we have one-on-one through that program is probably been as beneficial to those teachers as the actual content in the program. So it is important that we interact with students and we train teachers how to do that.
That's right.
Teachers aren't going to do that. They may not do that instinctively online. So we have to train teachers in how to be personal online.
Yeah, and I think that becomes part of a program evaluation, you know, so these standards are where, you know, we look at all of the online schools, all of the hybrid programs, and we say, how do we evaluate them? And, you know, we will get into this in our third session, and actually David provided some really nice rubrics and things that they're using right now that we'll look at as well. Hopefully David will take us through that. But here, you know, to Rabbi's point, what's the success rate and what does success look like? How are we defining success for our programs? You know, are we doing internal evaluations to analyze the data? And what metrics are we using? Are we looking at learner success to make those decisions on instructors and so on in the online programs? You know, what does this look like? You know, are we using any kind of standardized test results, not just that they all made a grade A or they all made a grade B? You know, what are we doing to cross-reference the standards of the class being taught by the English teacher in my school versus the class being taught by the English outsourced content provider or school partner? So, you know, how do I know that an A is an A? And, you know, what's other measures am I putting in place? And, you know, so, and it goes on here, you know, are there evaluation processes or procedures? You know, what feedback am I getting? Am I also doing a survey out to those parents and to all those stakeholders that I'm doing with my brick and mortar? And what do they look like? What are the comparisons? You know, are they feeling community, to Larry's point? Are they feeling that they belong to my school? What's missing? And how do I address that? Or how can I address that? And it may even be things as simple as, you know, when we have those parent nights or we have performances or we have ceremonies, are the online kids included? Can they participate virtually or are they invited to my campus if they can travel? So there's a lot of things there. They get some really good examples. So, you know, this is all about the faculty evaluations, reviewing and evaluating courses. So lots of examples. And again, you can download this one. So that's the online programs. Now looking at the actual online courses. So I'll flip heads. Any questions on the online programs before I go back to that? So I'll open up, maybe I've got my internet back fully again. Any questions on how to use that resource, that online evaluation or the National Standards for Online Programs? Everybody's good, no questions on that one? All right, great. So then let me share the next one, which is the resource for us looking at online courses. Let me stop that one. And let me share my screen again. Okay, Larry, is this showing my screen?
Yes, you're fine.
Oh, great. Okay. So this is the document looking at online courses. So remember, the first one I showed you was the online programs. That's general, that's all aspects of a program. And now we're going to dig deeper with online courses and actually look at what are these third-party groups teaching my kids online? And does it, does it check all the boxes that I need? Or if my teachers are building the courses online and I'm using my own content, it's got to be more than using the resources I had in a brick and mortar school. It's not just taking my textbook and making PDFs and throwing it online. Are all of these resources hitting properly? And I'll hit it very, very quickly here so that we have about 10 minutes at the end for any questions. So in the online courses, let's look at the first one, which is the course overview and support. Again, a lot of standards. We've got 8 standards here looking at some of the things that are required. And these are all coming from, Quality Matters and all of the people that have done the research on this for decades. So it's very simple things. If you think about it, when you first enter a course in a brick and mortar, they give you your, your syllabus, your overview for the course. So all those things that you would expect, you also have to have available in the online program, So is there a syllabus? Are there digital literacy skills expected? And is that clear? Because somebody may not even know how to click a mouse. Or actually don't have a mouse nowadays. May not be able to sweep. They may not be able to use an online course. And so, is there a little test? Is there an entree kind of test that says, click on here to show this. This is how you'll use your this is how you'll access your testing. This is how you'll see your lessons. This is how, so we should have those things at the beginning that make it self-explanatory, and I don't need a degree to even learn how to use the platform. The instructor, does the instructor have a bio? Are there ways to communicate with me? Is it clear as the user that I know how to get in touch with my teacher? Are there policies, for example, what happens if I appear to be cheating? I'm not going to say that I'm cheating, but if it appears that there's plagiarism or something else, those policies have to be there. So all of this is just getting kids an orientation, prior to even beginning the content. There are requirements for online courses that should be very evident the moment we open up the courses. And actually, when evaluating with principals, I've done many times where I've taken principals through determining if coursework or third-party providers are actually what I'm looking for schools. And we've used this as a checklist. We've actually said, okay, let's grab this online course and see how many of these things can actually be used. So we've used this document ourselves. Got some really good examples as you go down through it. Is there regular contact with the instructor required? That's going to be something you as the accreditor will have, you'll have influence over. So, in an asynchronous course, those standards in an asynchronous course mean, can a kid go in and finish the course in one day if they manage to click their way through all the software? Or are there requirements for end of module testing? Are there requirements for a face-to-face meeting with the teacher? Is there a requirement for an email, regular feedback from the teacher? Are there numbers of those feedbacks? So all of those, do we want to make sure that the child has physical, or do we want to make sure the child has some kind of contact with an educator? Otherwise, they can just go through and click boxes and get themselves from beginning to end a course, complete the coursework, and they're done without verification. So these are important pieces, I think. David or Larry, anybody have feedback on that kind of policy?
No, not really. I just think that a lot of what you mentioned in that beginning is part of the teacher initiated too, as far as like a welcome letter, that kind of thing, with those specific guidelines that they expect, because even though you can do it through the course, a lot of the attributes of the introduction will be unique to the course. And that could be things as simple as, where do you find your scientific calculator, those type of things, if it's that type of course. And plus, I always wanted my teachers to do it from a personal perspective, not just some boilerplate template thing hitting the kid when they came on to their course. And so it was a little bit more personal. And then the last point I'll make in that whole sequence too, it's important to lay out specific timelines, specific timelines, not only what your expectations are as far as the teacher action at the time the course is assigned, or when the student starts online, but also the timeline. What is the expectation within 24 hours, this, because if it's not laid out specifically and you get into gray, as you know, gray leads to problems.
Absolutely. And I think part of that orientation prior to the start of the online course can be a one-on-one greeting or actual webinar like this with the class and the teacher. This is your orientation, and the teacher can physically walk them through, or a support staff member, someone can actually do that. So, you know, that's a good point, is it can be very personal.
And a lot of this, the amount and type is also going to vary greatly by grade level.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
By
So
grade level, because the higher the grade, and the other thing too, the higher the grade the student is, and the more experience they have with the LMS, the less you need to do for the student. They just want to go. They just want to get going and let's go. And so they know how to get help. They know where their support is. They know what to do. So if it's done properly at the beginning, when that student is immersed in online education, the amount of synchronous support minimizes or reduces as the student gets older.
well, and that brings up a great point as well for you as accreditors. You know, have you made a decision that you're going to allow fully asynchronous learning, for example, in grades kindergarten to third grade? So, you know, a lot of places don't. A lot of them think we've absolutely got to have a live teacher. The child has to meet with us live, because we're teaching how to read at that point. And, you know, do you need the parent involved in the early grades? Those are decisions that in order to operate an online school in pre-K through grade 3, while children are learning to read, we only allow synchronous instruction where there's a teacher fully allocated to the students. So, but on the other hand, you may think differently. At the high school level, you know, so there's lots of there nuances.
And if you do allow it in those lower grades, or even in middle school and below, it's almost important to have a training session, an orientation session for the parent and the guardian as it is the student. So they know exactly what's going on. And that's where I've seen a big breakdown, is the parent or guardian is not up to date as to what the student is expected to do or how to do it. And so they might have a kid that's, as we say, snowing them that I'm doing all this work or making all this progress, but there's no way for them to confirm it.
Oh, that's right. And half the times, you know, you find the kids sitting playing online games or doing other things. You know, what mechanisms are you using to really make sure the kid's actually working? And mom saying, well, Johnny was on the computer for 6 hours. He was doing it. What do you mean he made a D? Well, you know, Johnny wasn't doing my work for 6 hours. It was asynchronous something else. But unless you got a protocol in place to capture that activity, and to know that you've got a time of entry, timed login, time, and so on. So your choice of platforms and those things is really, really important. So really quickly, sorry, Larry.
Yeah, I think too, it's important to set expectations, very clear, very precise expectations for student work. Probably more important on the online environment than it is in the classroom. You know, I'm teaching right now and I have college professors that will give 2-word answers. And then the next professor on the same question will write 1,000 words. And I don't want 1,000 words, but I don't want 2 words. So it's important to set expectations of what you want as a final outcome from your students as well, and be very precise about that.
That's a great point, Larry. So when selecting third-party providers, one of the keys is that your schools need to be able to adapt or modify whatever is there, that it cannot be one size fits all, because you have to have authority and control over the curriculum and over how that curriculum is delivered in your school. And that will eliminate 50% of the providers on the market today. So it's really important that you understand why you're going to make those kind of recommendations to your schools.
It's also important that you minimize who has the authority to manipulate the content, because I've seen some very strange things happen based on personal opinion in courses.
That's right. Well, and that's a whole conversation in itself, because you're absolutely right. So when people are able to, all of a sudden, you know, you can have individual teachers or people saying, well, he doesn't need to do 10 examples, he only needs one. And, you know, that way he's going to get through everybody's going to make an A, or, you know, so there's a lot of manipulation of that kind of thing that, well, I don't want them to do this essay or this 1,000-word essay. I only want them as long as they say yes or no. So to your point, maintaining the quality of the course and understanding how to do that is putting some of these protocols in place. So let's look at standard B on courses is content. And this one is really looking at the curriculum itself. You know, is it aligned? You know, are the standards incorporated? Which standards do they use? Is it free of adult content or unnecessary advertising? Some of them aren't. You know, is all licensing, is all of the third party, the copyright information and so on. Is there backup or support materials? So for example, if I say, read this book, is the book there? Or does the child have to go buy another book? Or is the access to the resource there? Is it easy for somebody to find? Because for example, if I say, we're gonna read this novel, and the novel isn't attached right there for me, the child has to go look for it, find it. At that point, they're going out to another resource. It could be Amazon, could be anything else, and they're looking for it. Now we've just sent our students to go off and meander through the internet. And you know, we want to lock down as much of that distracting process as possible, and to avoid advertising and, you know, goodness knows where else some of these sites actually take you to. So looking at things like that's really, really important. You know, the objectives of the courses, what will the learner be able to demonstrate they can do as a result of finishing up the course? Are the expectations consistent? You know, are they representative of where you want them to be and the courses and so on? Going all down through, you know, do they have standards, and are they the same standards that you want them to be aligned to? You know, if you've got a course that's completely aligned to Common Core, is that what you're teaching? Is that what you want? Because that's going to be plastered all over the course, or whatever the set of standards are. Do you, let's see, so there's supporting materials reflect culturally diverse perspective, free of bias. Is that important to you? Because if it is, then you need to really have a look at some of these things. I mean, I've seen some of this came up when working with internationals, where pictures and so on, and photographs used in content showed women in girls in their spaghetti straps or things like that, which was inappropriate for use with them culturally. They didn't want to see that. They wanted to make sure shoulders were covered, you know, things like that. So it's just really important that you understand how the content provider has created their courses, and that someone who understands these things, just like you would do a deep dive when you're doing a textbook adoption, you should really be doing a similar amount using rubrics and using assessment tools. You should really be doing that with the third-party providers, not just saying, hey, you know, everybody, they're NCAA approved. Well, that's a process that doesn't even involve you looking at the curriculum. That's just a process that says identify the provider, identify the accreditation, and so on. So, you know, do your own diligence is what I'm saying on many of them. Yeah.
Go back to that last one, the free of bias. For many of our faith-based schools, we don't want to be totally free of bias. We want biases. And so we make sure that the right bias is in the curriculum that you are offering. You know, for a Catholic school to have a lot of the abortion materials that are now being produced in this controversy and have that embedded in the curriculum, unless you go through the curriculum, there's a bias there that you don't want. So you don't want to totally be free of all biases, but you want to make sure that you capture the biases that meet your mission.
That's right. And so to your point, Larry, again, you must do your own diligence on all of these third-party providers, because just like you would with a textbook adoption of a series, you're going to be very clear about what it is that's relevant for your schools, And you don't want to be the nightmare that says somebody's child comes home and they've selected your school because you're a Christian school or you're a Jewish school or you're whatever school, and they have expectations of what that means. And then they hit something that is very secular in your content. And it was just because you, number one, didn't do the diligence on the content or the provider. And number two, didn't have the ability to manipulate or remove that piece, to adapt that curriculum to meet your own needs. So let's see the accuracy and currency of, this doesn't come in too much with the AP textbooks, the AP courses changing and hitting a new syllabus and new requirements. That's always a big one, to make sure that they're current. The other place where this will come into play is if there's a new set of standards and you have certain requirements to hit. If someone changes standards, or let me think. Well, there's a number of these. Instructor, right now, we're seeing a lot of updates for online course material to meet these new, diversity requirements that, again, may not, they'll be updated and they'll be where legally they're supposed to be, but that may not be, what you want based on the reasons why you are private schools. Unnecessary advertising. A lot of places have links embedded in them, and they have things there where you just don't want the students to go out to accidentally hit, because remember, when links and things go out very often, that link source changes and you could end up with pornographic materials and all kinds of stuff. So you've got to be, and this can happen anywhere. It could happen with somebody changing a link or a letter or something, even on your own website. You just have to be very careful about what you're doing with these things and screen for them at all times. And more importantly, have a process in place and a protocol in place that says, if you become aware of these things, they were not intentional. So you have to protect yourself by saying, these are not intentional. Your process is report this immediately to, give the person, identify where it is. And so that it's clear that as things change and errors may occur, you've got a process in place that helps you to catch and assess these things. Same thing, cover yourself and protect yourself with copyright or licensing. This is facilitation. Does the instructor have access to things? Are there answer keys there? Are you providing the supports the instructor needs? I'll whip through these very quickly because we're just about out of time. The instructional design of the course, the learner assessment protocols, accessibility and usability. So this is a big one. Are your courses accessible by children who have special needs? And there are actual regulations and stuff on that now. And some of you take federal dollars and things that you're going to need to be aware of, really making sure of compliance protocols in place for these. And then overall course evaluations, how are we evaluating the courses? And, that's about it. So I'll go back to this. The important website for those of you who want to look at that. We'll look at online teaching when we go in tomorrow as well, but look at these standards, and I'll stop sharing. And so I'll end here with 10 minutes for questions or feedback or any thoughts. I hope we didn't send anybody into a tailspin, as they say, with all of this information, but it's a whole morph. It's a whole new industry. That has become mainstream. It had been something on the peripheral edges. It had been those things that on the outside that people do, when they want to go online. But now it's fully embraced as mainstream. So online learning, online training, hybrid learning, they're things that are now part of our everyday schools and organizations. And the big question is, do you have safety measures in place? Do you have protocols? Do you have standards in place to protect your organization and help your organization protect your schools? Because the time will come when they will be challenged in all respects.
I just wanted to add in there with the courses. We looked at the standards. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is especially with programs from one course to the next course within an organization, we have to have continuity so the students know where to find materials in one course and then it's located in the same place in the other course as well.
Yeah, and I think that all comes down to the instructional design is in really making sure that those user experiences are something that they understand, they see it, and it's replicated, as you say, the whole way through, so that once I learn the process, my online school, even if I'm using 3 or 4 different content providers, my onboarding to my online school is the same. It's a single process, and even if my school or organization has multiple parties, my online school should have that same protocol, that same place.
Paul?
So I have this scenario that I want to run by you and try to figure out how I'm supposed to handle this. We have a lot of teacher vacancies, and we also have a lot of teachers in towns that don't have schools. And so we have a third-party person that is interested in putting out, connecting with our teachers that are all over the United States, and then funneling education into classrooms that are vacant. So for example, a school could have all teachers in all the rooms, but they don't have a second grade teacher. And like the last scenario would be, okay, we're going to do an online teacher for that second grade for this next year. What scenario with that online teaching, online courses, online programs, which one of those 3 would you call that?
So I've done that as part of my prior organization. One of the companies that I worked with, that was actually a product, so to speak, that we sold, and we called that supplemental education services. And so we would fill in a teacher and content, work with you to make sure the content was the content you worked, and we would actually create that supplemental classroom using a teacher from one of your approved groups. We got them trained and so on. And then we would put them in either because somebody was out on maternity leave, because somebody left us midstream, or whatever reason people don't have a teacher while they're searching for a full-time physical body. So, you know, designing that program, it's really about, you're really looking for quality online teaching. And that's really the online teaching standards. We'll have a look at those when we go through on Wednesday. So what you're doing is you're not changing, you're not adding a virtual school. You're not changing your school or your curriculum. What you're doing is you're supplementing to the vacancy right there until you find a physical body. Your goal is to get a physical. And so 2 sets of trainings need to take place. One is providing it is a, there's a standard in place there to allow you to do this. So you're going to write those standards to allow that. And then you're going to need to train not only a teacher, but you're going to need to train, you must have a resource in that building. So, you know, do you have a teacher assistant? Do you have a volunteer? Do you have your media specialist or somebody that runs the tech in the building? And how do you combine both of those, you know, both of those resources? And that is labor intensive to get them all.
This model is pretty common too. I've run into it. I do a lot of research in online teaching, so I actually was an adjunct for Edmentum too, just to learn about them. And what you run into is a lot of residential programs where they do this, and they'll use like the private virtual high school as your vehicle to produce the teacher and the content and the delivery, but yet the facilitator at the residential program is the person actually on site and then kind of acting as a paraprofessional, whatever you want to call it. You know, they're in there. And I've seen this very common with residential programs, also with jail education programs. I ran a jail education program here in Arizona, and jail education programs don't do diplomas. They generally geared more toward GED or literacy is what they do. And so we partnered our school with them by internet to graduate students. So there are a lot of models like that.
Yeah, and the one of the more upper end models is on the other extreme is like the Malone Group. So the Malone Group, for example, does high end. It's for, you know, upper end private schools, and they've created this this grouping in this model. But Paul, I would say, you know, don't go out with somebody that's going to try to create that for you. There are experience. It's too hard to start from scratch. At this point, it's going to cost you millions, and there'll be mistakes all over. So training facilitators, making sure that there's also someone in the room that not only has the technology wherewithal to support the development of the content, but also a facilitator to do, it may just be simple classroom management, depending on the kids and how the course works. So if you want, happy to have a private conversation where we can go through exactly what's involved in that model and recommendations on how to do that, you know. Now I'm sure, you know, those of us that have been in it would have ability to help you to get that done if that's something it's something we're all going to face, because I don't know if you've seen the stats recently, but the dropouts of teachers who are ending this year, not coming back, we're all going to be facing that shortage. And so implementing that, supplementing our instruction with an online teacher during the physical day with a facilitated learning protocol, it's really just facilitated learning, using content and so on, is going to be really, really important. So happy to point you in the way of resources and you know, how to help people set up, or to help you screen an interview if people are coming to you to try to do this, because I've made every mistake in the book, as David knows. You know, we've been around in this business 20 odd years and helped to write some of these standards with Nicole and everybody else. That, you know, things have blown up on our faces, so now we know what not to do, and we can help you from you know, making the mistakes that we've had to experiment with over time.
Thank you.
Well, as I said the other day when we talked, it's more, we minimize. I don't know if you ever eliminate, but you can minimize anyway the mistakes. But yes, it's always a learning experience.
You know, I think, Trina, there's a couple precursors before we get even into the standards that every school, every organization must have, and spend some serious time working through. One is an acceptable use policy that's signed by parents if you're dealing with minors, and have a really quality. And there's a number of those on the NCPSA website that you can look at and see that acceptable use policy. And the other one is a really good course in digital citizenship for all students and teachers, that they really understand the whole idea of plagiarism. You know, kids, they go out and they copy off from Wikipedia and they think they are PhDs now because they can cut and paste out of Wikipedia. So I think there's a number of things that are precursors to building standards and building that will get you in really good stead in your process.
Yeah, and there's a couple of good questions that came up here. Carol, thanks for saying you find this valuable. I hope everybody else does as well. Cliff said, is it permissible for the associations to use these standards, modify them to align with the association's mission? And the answer on that is yes. So if you start going around, these standards are all things that, you know, they're what's the word?
Universal.
Yeah, you know, they're not quite open ed resources, but they are like a common copyright, so that as long as you acknowledge that you're using those, and I can pull some of that information for you now, but as long as you acknowledge that you are using these, you know, the standards, and you just put a link at the bottom based upon the quality standards by, you know, nsqol.org, then as long as you reference them and give them credit for being something that you're based on, you can use them. Any other questions? And I'm not sure if Larry, did you put my email in there?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, we'll wrap it up then today. I hope everybody found it valuable. We will dig in again on and look at some of the standards that have been written by our own organizations. We've got, I got some from Middle States. I'll have them from ACTS, and we've got them from, David's got them from Arizona, and we'll dig in and we'll look at those actual standards as well. And the goal is that you'll have access to those by the time we finish up the week, so that you can mix and match and dig in and see what's already there, so you're not reinventing the wheel. But happy reading on the NSQs right now, and hopefully you'll have a chance to read through and ask any questions. Email me if you've got questions before Wednesday, and I'll see you all on Wednesday afternoon. All right.